Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. And of course, if you're new here, welcome to my channel. I am Rose. I simply like to draw fun and creative things with various mixed mediums. In today's video, we will be playing with one of my favorite materials, which is watercolored pencils. I absolutely love using this stuff for more serious projects, much like acrylic paint. So, yeah, I figured I not try something with it. And when I was thinking about a theme of what to draw today, I figure what better thing than the very theme of this channel, which is skulls and unicorns. Which reminded me of an old project I did back in 2013. If you look above where those little two paperweights are, one of those is one of the original ones I did, all done in black and white ink, very simple, but it was one of my favorites that I held on to in that form, and I have a couple of prints I managed to save that didn't quite sell. Now, as for this process, what we start off with usually is I take a light color, as watercolor pencils are very harsh, so if you are to use pencil first, in this case, it doesn't blend as nice when at the end, and it might smudge with the pencil markings. So in this case, you start with a light color that's close enough as you can to the actual item in question that you're drawing. And what I'm simply doing is going off of references of, in this case, some horse skulls, the spine and whatnot. I'm simply placing them around in my head of it and transplanting them to the paper as best as possible with the pencil before I start really going through with the dark lines that are more important to the piece, as you want to make sure that those very defined lines that make skulls, of generally speaking, pop more, much around like the eye socket and whatnot. It is very faint, but as you can see, we're kind of getting past the point where you can at least see the skulls taking shape. And at this point, I will go through my various colored pencil collection, as I've already started thinking, what colors do I need to continue the project? Which can take time, as I'm trying to usually color match from a picture, as well as noticing little detail I might have missed. I was referencing 4 different pictures, so it took a little bit to figure out what direction I wanted it to go, deleting a few that I thought I was going to use, and then end up using something else, which is honestly most of the time my process. I'll just typically look stuff up and see what triggers my brain, and then let my imagination fill in the blanks. In this case, it was finding this bit of the spinal cord and a really nice version of a horn of bone, which was a fun one to find, a one that looked nice to me. And here's the actual part where, as you can see, I'm starting to pull out colors. It's a very minimal color piece, so the colors had to pop and make sense. So I don't plan to use too many in this one. A few little touch-ups as it happens. And what I like to do as well, as you can see what I'm doing, is I'm just kind of filling in what needs to be with that base light color. Enough that I can still highlight later, but also it'll blend in underneath to the darker shades that I'm going on top of. It'll help with the gradient effect it would take for proper blending. I have not used some of these in a while, so there's a bit of sharpening involved. And after all of that, now you can see I will start doing the dark lines and figure out where I want the shadows to be. Everything from the teeth, the socket, and so forth. Just kind of pick up a spot and eye about where I want it to be. I was not going for an exact picture of reference. I was simply relying on what I saw and trying to fill in what felt right with the dark color, as that will be the main factor of those real pops of color when everything is blended in. Something I found interesting with this particular project is typically when I do my watercolor pieces, I will typically spend way more time as I'm overthinking the details, the shadows, every little crack in the piece. It's just everything. Everything must be perfect, as I'm sure plenty of artists out there who are or aspiring artists watching this may understand that you try your best to make it match the perfect image you have in your head, and you find yourself taking more time than really was necessary on just the smallest bit of like the crack of a smile, a glimmer of an eye, just those little things that no one really looks at as much, but you're eyeing it as you want it to be perfect. What I found funny with this experience was that I was trying my best not to really think, just let my mind do its thing, and just let my hands guide me, let the colors guide me, and just see where it went. And what I found absolutely interesting was, as much as it felt more rushed from my normal pieces, which the longest I've spent on a watercolor piece was probably 2 weeks, I find that honestly, at the end of this is probably one of my favorite pieces that I would genuinely put in a frame and hang in my actual home. It just came out so well. Just, I liked how the lines came, and it really just goes to show you that sometimes overthinking can be great in that sense of you think about those details that give you that aha moment you need to make something spectacular. And other times, it really wasn't necessary, and you really didn't have to go through all the extra effort when with what you were doing was just the right amount. And this was one of those cases where I really wowed myself. Just really, it was a timed challenge of how fast can you finish something closer to the realism side. I don't really go into photorealism, just capturing those more accurate colors and details, much like a real, bone. It's a skeleton of a unicorn, obviously, so it's a bit of a different story there. Not like an actual, animal skull, but it's rather just, it really blew my own mind away just how fast I was able to complete this. What you're seeing is the sped up version. Pardon, my allergies are still there. But what you're seeing is a sped up version of this piece, when in reality, it took me an hour and 10 minutes to do this entire thing. And I was just so focused on getting this done, nothing else distracting besides a bit of background music, or in this case, I was listening to a video, a stream, and just going. And I was able to get it done what felt like seconds, considering what I typically will spend on with watercolor pencils, as it's a lot of fine detail. So yeah, absolutely. If you're ever just kind of sitting there and you feel like it's something's missing, or you find yourself just stuck in your head with your art pieces, just sometimes try to remember that you could possibly just be overthinking, and it's gonna turn out fine. Just take a step back, breathe, and let your skill just show what it wants to show. At this part here, I start realizing I don't like the horn as much as I did, and I found a different one, which love that secondhand change of pace there. I start kind of messing with the shape a little bit, going through adding some overlay of colors that will help add in that very greasy bone effect that bones tend to have when not properly cleaned, was where a lot of my reference of color came from, besides just the photo, which tends to have either a yellowish, peach tones to it. Kind of depends on how roughly cleaned or lack of clean the bone is. So I was kind of having fun with making it kind of old and decrepit a little bit, kind of to add a little bit of the spookiness. I think it fit the vibe pretty well. Adding in some of that other darker colors, that shading. The key with watercolor pencils for sure is put down your soft base first and be very precise about where you want those dark colors. Because you can erase it in the pencil form and have it be where you want, and that's fine. But in the after process, with water, which you'll see in a little bit, you cannot take it back. Once you add water, you have to make it work. So I was trying my best, especially with the teeth, to really make sure it's exactly where I wanted it to be before I start putting in the effort of actually like blending the colors together. So you can see a bit more now as I'm trying to make those details pop, fill in those areas in the piece that I really want to stand out a bit more. As you can't add any highlights, but you can but you can add the low lights, which is what helps everything pop. So it's every decision counts. So a tiny bit of overthinking helps with this, more for future you problems. And as you can see now, I'm getting ready to do the background, and I prefer to do the background, well, even if it's something as simple as what I'm doing here, which is a one color background, just so that way it makes the picture stand out more. I like to try something that's either much darker than the original piece that I'm working on, or the subject in question, or I like to pick a color that contrasts what I'm doing, whether it's the opposite of the color spectrum or it's something that's very little on the picture. So that way, as you can see, that blue is really allowing that the bluish black kind of gray I'm using is really bringing out that yellow brown. So it'll really help in enhancing how much the bone pops. And I believe at this point is when I start a little bit of details and start thinking about actually getting up and getting some water, as well, you kind of need that to paint. And I have my various favorite brushes there. I really only use 2 brushes for this, but I have my general arsenal always there for my recent project I was working on. And yes, here's when you see those colors finally come together. all the work of the layering and carefully blending where I want the water to go. Even those light areas, as long as you place them carefully enough, you'll still get those highlights that were previously mentioned. Pardon myself. Yeah. Allergies are an interesting thing. Just as you can see, as I'm just using my brush, blending in where it's at, and you're starting to see all those colors I placed previously, including those pale colors underneath, start to really blend together and really get that greasy bone color that I was really aiming for. I am seriously happy with how this turned out. This turned out better than I expected for the time frame. I expected to film this in small parts and have to divide it up with how picky I am, but it looks absolutely as I pictured, considering. Of course, I have some gripes, but I'm an artist. That doesn't really ever stop. You will always critique your work more than the people actually viewing it. And thus is the life of an artist, really. But as you can see, slowly the magic of these watercolor pencils, all the layering that was done, just the way that it blends in with the water, at this point it was all Hail Marys and hope for the best, as I can't take it back now. This is the color that's going to be there. And as you can see, it's really starting to finally build up. All those extra work, even those pale layers you could hardly see at the beginning, are starting to actually to bear fruit in the situation. All the little bits of the spine and trying to keep up the highlights and the lowlights, not blend too far into it, rinse out the brush constantly. It is a repeat process of a little bit of water at a time, carefully placing it where you want. If necessary, go through, add the pencil to to re-add in those dark colors and that shading that may have been muted a little too much when you were blending, which is also something that can happen. It's pretty malleable stuff, so you can go through and always fix it. Even after it dries, it's pretty forgiving. You just can't erase it per se. All you can do is enhance and hope for the best. But as you can see, the details are coming together. I'm getting towards the end where I'm just starting to get in those small crevices of the piece from the holes of the spine, the mouth, and really starting to think about, is there enough shading? Is it dark enough in some places to really bring out more of a 3D effect? And for the most part, this was an interesting one because obviously it's not exact to the picture I was using. I was kind of taking creative license. But as a whole, I was pretty happy with this. Now, as you can see, as much as I explained the process, now it's easier. It's much easier to really show you. As you can see, now that that background is starting to pop, it's a nice smoky gray color, which I absolutely. What I love about watercolor pencil is that particular effect. It can be ethereal. It can be kind of smoke fog. It can be beautiful for water. It's really how you manipulate those pencil stroke movements. And in this instance, I feel like it has a very foggy feeling, much like Headless Horseman, kind of like Spooky Night. Just it has that softest blue fog that really, again, brings out the yellow in the bone, so it makes it pop out more, as opposed to blending into the white paper. But it also just kind of fits the mood of it really well. So it's a good choice of color. And at this point here, I just kind of go through with my brush, a bit of pencil, kind of double checking things that may have overblended. and afterwards I will sign, and well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this process, and thank you for watching.